Hi, I'm Katie Cowgill. I am a grant writer with learngrantwriting.org and Seneca Works. I live here in Kenai, Alaska, and this week we are going to talk about 990s and what you can do to use them for your own purposes. So first of all, we know that your time is valuable, and what I'm going to do in this presentation is help you answer a few questions. The first is, what is a 990? Where do you find them? And what you should be looking for to quickly and efficiently pull out the information you need. So first of all, a 990 is a tax form filed by nonprofit organizations. They're required to file it annually to report gains, losses, and contributions throughout the year. This is what a 990 looks like. This is a paper format. I'll show you a little bit later what an e-file format looks like. We have two really great resources that we follow for finding 990s quickly. Our first and foremost favorite is Instrumentl.com. They are an online grant database where you can search thousands of public and private organizations, including federal grants. They have a very easy to read setup for a lot of 990s, and they also go back a few years of the full reports. You can also search on candid.org, which is an online resource that also works with Guidestar. Some of you might be familiar. That is how you can locate nonprofit information for basically any actual registered nonprofit. So this is what Instrumentl looks like, and this is one of those easy to read formats that shows you a little bit of great go-to information for your foundation that you're looking at. The Instrumentl format can show you the number of grants per state, per country, per year, and you can pull full 990 reports back. This one goes back at least 7 years, which is great. Gives you a really good idea of the typical grant making that this organization does throughout history. Here you can find the number of grants per year and the total giving per year, which you can divide to figure out what the average grant amount is. And candid.org is a little bit harder to navigate. However, they have lots of great information. You can search foundations and grants that are available, or you can search on Guidestar, and that gives you those 990 reports we're talking about. So here you go, you can search for private or public charitable organizations and go ahead and find where those tax forms are, which you can download. They typically go back 3 years on Guidestar. So again, at Learn Grant Writing, we really love Instrumentl, and we want you to learn how great they are also. You can receive $50 off your first month with discount code Learn Grant Writing, and let us know what you think, and keep in touch with us and let us know what you think about Instrumentl. So next is what you should be looking for, and this is where I'm going to help you sort out exactly the information that helps you identify whether or not this organization and this funding opportunity is going to be the right fit for you. So first of all, you want to ask yourself a few questions about this funder. First of all, did this funder award grants the previous year or the most recent 990 that you have? How much did they pay out that year? How much is allocated for future awards? And does this funder tend to award grants to a specific region, organization, or do they have a diverse portfolio of grant making? And what I mean there is when you look at the organizations that they've made grants to, is it generally churches? Is it generally colleges? Do they only award to the same organizations year after year? Or is it all across the board, all across the country, all across the world? So those are really important questions to ask, because if you see a funder that only awards to New York and you live in Alaska, the likelihood that you're going to get funded through that grant is pretty slim. So first of all, you're going to start with the paper 990s at line 25. That is contributions, grants, and gifts paid through the year. So the question I always ask myself here is this a zero? Because if this number is a zero, you can move on to the next one. That means that they did not make any awards that previous year. So the next thing that we look for is we go down to part 15, section 3. That's going to be the total awards and approved for payments approved for future years. And there's also generally listed either an attachment or a schedule there that you will scroll down to the bottom and find, and that will give you the actual organization names, addresses, the reason for the funding, the type of funding, and the amount.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
So there's no approved for future payment grants listed there. Is that unusual or is that fairly common?
It's fairly common. However, I would say maybe 30% of the time I come across future payments awarded.
Got it. Like because they made a multiple year commitment, and then that's what that means. Okay.
Yeah. Got
it. And then another question I know that we get asked by students a lot is, well, okay, so fine, it's not zero, but it's some amount. Like what's still too small and what's too large of an amount? And I know that what I advise is that it does depend. So if they're only giving grants in the state of Tennessee and it's $200,000 and you're seeking like a $20,000 grant, then you would think like, well, this is actually pretty reasonable. But if they're only giving $200,000 and they give nationwide, then it's not reasonable. And so you should move on because those are just not large enough amounts to be worth your time. So that's something else I think students and listeners need to pay attention to, is just how much is the total amount, and then just how much does that make sense compared to how big their giving geography is. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And especially, if they say that they award up to $2,000 grants and they have a $200,000 total grant making, that seems more reasonable than if you're looking for a $50,000 grant and they only awarded $200,000 the year before.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I'm going to go to at this point is scroll down to that schedule or that attachment that was listed. And this is going to, again, give you a list of those organizations. This is the important part, in my opinion, where you can see those regions, those types of organizations, and the total amount each one of them got. And you can compare that with the year before and see how many of those organizations do actually get contributions year after year after year. And that will also give you a really good idea of how competitive these are. So finally, this is what an e-file application looks like from my experience. It's fairly similar, and once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to peruse through these just as quickly, but the line numbers are different. So on an e-file, it's actually part 1, line 13. And you're going to be going to part 4 of supplemental information, which is schedule 1. And that is where you're going to find that information on the organizations. And another thing I wanted to point out is that most of the time in these 990s, there will be some definition of the criteria. I believe it's required, but sometimes it's not in the reports you find. But there will be a definition of the criteria for how these grant funders are actually deciding who is worthy of funding. So.
I did not know that. So is that what that explanation is there? It's saying they develop a preliminary report and recommendations and on and on.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. Had no idea.
And finally, this is just another close-up that you can see of the organizations, the addresses, their public charity. This was the purpose of the contribution. And in this one, I really liked it because almost every grant amount was $10,000. So it gave you a really good idea of, hey, they may say they fund up to 20,000, but they really don't. They fund up to 10,000, and generally that's what they're going to give. So also a really good one to check is what they're actually funding versus what they're saying. So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's newsletter on 990s. Be sure to check out our blog. There is more information on grant databases and 990 reports on learngrankwriting.org. Thank you.